So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gerontological Society of America's Career Conversation. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so our topic today is moving into academic leadership roles. And I'm Dr. Patty Slatum, a visiting scholar with the GSA and faculty with the Virginia Center on Aging at Virginia Commonwealth University. Before we begin today's program, I would like to provide a few logistical considerations. Please keep your audio on mute during the event and submit your questions for the panelists through the Zoom chat. We invite you to view the event in Zoom speaker view, and the career conversation is being recorded and will be available after the event. And I am joined today by GSA work group members, Dr. Matthew Smith from Texas A&M University, and Dr. Tiffany Washington from the University of Georgia, who will serve as co-moderators. And in addition, Dr. Tanya Roberts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison is part of the work group and will be helping me in monitoring the chat today. So to open today's career conversation, I would like to introduce our panelists. And we're very fortunate to have a distinguished group of GSA members with us to share their perspectives on gerontologists moving into academic leadership roles. First, we welcome Dr. Tracy Gendron as an associate professor serving in an academic leadership role at the department level as chair of the Department of Gerontology at Virginia Commonwealth University. And her scholarship focuses on ageism, which we'll learn more about. Next, we welcome Dr. Nancy Croft, currently serving as Dean of Perimeter College and Professor of the School of Social Work at Georgia State University. And she entered this role after serving in several other academic leadership roles. And her scholarship focuses on late life caregiving relationships. And next, we welcome Dr. Keith Whitfield, a seasoned university administrator, currently serving as president of the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. And his scholarship focuses on the relationship between stress and longevity in African-American families. And we look forward to an engaging and enlightening conversation today. So we really appreciate your time today, panelists, to help us to explore this topic. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderators.
Thank you so very much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to learn from these three amazing administrators. We'd like to go ahead and start the conversation. Again, anybody who has any questions for these three individuals, please place them in the chat. But to start off, we'd really like to hear from each of you, starting with Dr. Gendron, then Dr. Croft, then Dr. Whitfield. What drove you to move into academic leadership? What drove you into this role, and how did you know that the right time or right opportunity was for you? Can we start with Dr. Gendron?
Hi, Matthew. Nice to see you. And yeah, great question. I'm going to be completely and totally honest here. I'm in a very, very small department, and I was the one who needed to step up and do this. It was my turn. It was that time. And the previous chair, who is still working in the department, was ready to move on in her own career and be able to focus less on administration and get back into her own research and professional development. So it was me, it was the right time, and it was for me. But that said, even though, that's kind of what drove it, she and I had been very thoughtfully and purposefully preparing for this transition for many years. So I was fortunate enough to think about it a couple of years beforehand and to try to wrap my head around, what makes a good leader? What skills do I think that I needed to really focus on before assuming the chair position? Starting to think about how relationships with my faculty, who were my peers, would change. And how I would, need to work with that and handle that, and kind of start to really think about strategic directioning, not only of the department, but really where I felt the field of gerontology was going and how I could position myself as chair of gerontology at VCU in relation to that. So even though it was of convenience, I was fortunate enough to have lead time where I could really thoughtfully think about some of these things to prepare for it.
Should I
That's
just hop in
wonderful.
there?
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, again, I'm Nancy Croft, and my journey into administrative role actually happened fairly early in my career. I was an assistant professor at Dr. Washington's institution, the University of Georgia, and my mentor, who was a gerontologist, tapped me on the shoulder and said, there is a position that I want you to think about. It's the assistant director of the Gerontology Center. I think you would be great. It would be good for you. And it would be great to have a social worker kind of lead at the forefront of gerontology. And so I hadn't thought about it, but as I considered it, first of all, my partner would tell you I'm very bossy. So giving directives comes very easy to me. And I thought it would be really interesting and exciting to take a field that I'm passionate about at a time when gerontology wasn't widely accepted, and be able to give it a venue also in my profession of social work. So I said yes. So was the time right for me? Looking back, it certainly was. But it really took a mentor, someone who reflected to me, I think you would do well. I think you have the skills. Why don't you think about it? That prompted me into my first administrative role.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Whitfield.
There we go. You can hear me now. Okay. It's interesting hearing my two colleagues talk about their transition, because parts of those were parts of mine. I did serve as a department chair, division chair when I was at Duke. And I will tell you that that is the hardest job you'll ever have, because very affectionately, it's like hand-to-hand combat. You are right in the face of your colleagues. And so once you do that, be careful, Tracy, who knows what's ahead for you. You get pulled into other sorts of things. But, you know, my story, if I was going to make it as short as possible, unlike how I usually tell stories, it would be that I was doing a lot of leadership sorts of things with GSA. I actually was the chair of the Minority Task Force, actually for 2 runs, had a lot of different opportunities and to work with mentees. And what I felt is that I was doing this next level work, but it was hard to see it. I wanted to do it more locally. And so in terms of timing, one of the things that happened is that I just happened to be finishing up one grant, and I was thinking about going into leadership, partly because I'd been told I should go into leadership. People will tell you that. But one of the things that I hope is clear throughout today's conversation is make sure that you go in at the right time. You know, you can do leadership, but some of those real heavy lift ones, make sure that you're a full professor first. Make sure that you've gone through the academy. So I had finished, I was a full professor, and I was actually being recruited away by another university. And so my university said, hey, you know, you like to do leadership stuff, here's a leadership training opportunity. And that was a great opportunity that funneled me into the provost's office, and the rest is history. Let's just put it that way. But I think sometimes our own abilities show through, and our colleagues encourage us to, or like Tracy, you know, you're the last one to say not it. But you know, sometimes it's because the group that you're working with needs leadership, and so you provide that service and you figure out that you actually like it.
All right, thank you. Okay, again, I would like to thank our 3 featured guests for being here today, Drs. Croft, Whitfield, and Gendron. And my question relates to trade-offs when moving into leadership administration roles. For example, one question that often comes up is, can I maintain my scholarship productivity if I move into this role? And then related to that, you know, so if there are gaps, say, in your CV, how do you craft the narrative about those gaps gaps related to the time you take to move into a leadership role. How might you craft?
Well, if I can jump in, I didn't know if we had an order. Um, but I don't know about my other two colleagues, but I've taken a perspective of being a scholar administrator. It's kind of a philosophical idea that you will not give up your scholarship. For me, it was easier because I'm a social scientist, and so I'm not running a lab and having to fund it and all those sorts of things, although I have gotten grants since I've been an administrator. I just for kicks and giggles, I saw the question and I said, hey, well, you can say that you're a scholar administrator, but how productive have you been? I looked, and since I really started formally the work, actually starting the provost office at Duke in 2011, I counted that I have 89 papers and 13 book chapters. And while that may sound, like it's okay, it's barely getting by, I know. Part of the reason why that I've had that level of productivity is what I did all the rest of my career, which is that I was very, very collaborative. I made sure that I had my own stuff to bring to the table, but found partnerships with folks. And where did I do that? I did that at the GSA meetings. And so it really is interesting of how your career can be crafted, can lend itself to making an easier transition into leadership. And to be able to, I feel like I have, basically the best of both worlds. And I also believe that in leadership roles that keeping your scholarship going has its benefits for your colleagues. I've only been in my current role for about a year now, but I can remember in my last role as provost, every now and then somebody would say, well, you don't know what it's like to be a faculty member. And I went, really? Let's see, how many publications did you get last year? Well, I got 10 last year. I have a grant. And I don't teach as much, but I give talks around the country. So tell me how I'm not. And it gives you a little bit of, street cred, as it were, with your colleagues. So it's one of those things that as you decide to go on, be thoughtful, because you may at some point want to come back to it. So you want to hold just enough of a hold into that area. I think both for your sanity, because for me, it's now what I do for fun. I mean, getting to do my research is actually a fun break. So I'm anxious to hear my colleagues' perspective on this point.
Well, I'm happy to go next. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I got this question is I've held a number of different roles. I've been a program director. I was the PhD program director at one point. This is actually my second deanship plus an interim deanship. I was in central administration as an associate VP for instruction. And some of those different roles are easier to maintain your area of scholarship because exactly what President Whitfield said, you can make collaborative relationships. I loved being the head of the doctoral program. Then you're always thinking about scholarship and research. In my current position, my deanship is at a 2-year college within an R1 university. I have 5 campuses. When I started, I had 19,000 students. Yes, that's 19, comma, the rest of it. And every day what comes at me is what someone else is bringing to me. And I found it more difficult in this position than previously. When I was a dean at a more research intensive program, like my past deanship was nursing and health professions, when I had to have those difficult conversations with faculty members who were not progressing, I could look that individual in the eye and say, yes, it's tough because, I wrote 5 books while I was, a dean. What I found I can't do, and this is somewhat disappointing, I was trained as an intervention researcher. I really had to give that up because as you all know, when you're delivering interventions or you're working with the staff who are doing that, there are certain protocols and you can't say, oh, we're going to delay this intervention because I have a crisis on one of my campuses. The air conditioning doesn't work. You just can't do that. So I moved away from that type of research. My last peer-reviewed article was a systematic review, and that was very forgiving. I worked with a team. I could craft it around the times that I knew in my own calendar. It would be easy for me to fit in. So like President Whitfield, I've had to modify and adapt what I'm doing as well as my day job, what I have to attend to. And that's been a good strategy.
Thank you.
So
Dr. Gendron?
yeah, I will add to that. And I wholeheartedly agree with everything that has been said. And I think that, as President Whitfield said, collaboration for me has really been essential to being able to do that. Um, like President Whitfield, my research is important to me. And I went into academia and I got my PhD because I have a love of research and a love of scholarship. So, in thinking about my priorities for my own happiness and professional development, it isn't something that I have been willing to give up. So, is it a challenge? Absolutely, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to find time to maintain all of the different buckets that we have to maintain. But collaboration truly helps that. If you have a team that can help carry some of the weight, if you have other people and scholars that you can lean on, and meeting them at GSA is an excellent suggestion. In my department, we're really fortunate because we have a departmental research agenda. So we have ties between all faculty members with all of our areas of interest. And we take a very collaborative approach. We have monthly meetings and we build off of each other's grants. We build off of each other's research. And that's helped me enormously because I have partners to be able to keep me accountable, to help me brainstorm, to help me move forward with my scholarship. So I think there are creative ways that you can do that. At the same time, of course, something has to give. So, you really do need to think about, if this is something I'm not willing to let go, what are some things that I can let go, whether that be not participating in as many committees as you did before, or, trying to teach a little bit less than you did, or at least being strategic about the courses that you do teach, because it is pretty hard to maintain all of that at full capacity. So there's some strategies that you can use to think it through.
Yeah, those are all some very good points. And if I may very quickly summarize a couple of things, Dr. Whitfield talking about just the motivation to continue your scholarship as currency should you want to transition back into that faculty role. Dr. Croft, your point about sort of repackaging your research, right? Modifying and adapting as needed. And Dr. Gendron, I love your points about the teams, the synergy of the team and being able to collaborate and, sort of capitalize on that synergy to continue moving forward. Thank you very much. I'll pass it back to Dr. Smith.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And I'm really enjoying this conversation because there's so many other points that are brought up, not only about collaboration and relationships and the evolution, but pre-planning. So with all of that coming, and we've all been still in, but coming off of this COVID issue, this ongoing, elongated kind of new normal, whatever we would call this, I think it really starts to bear to light what are some of the skills. If you're a leader, what are the skills that are really most valuable to you? What is it that you're really relying upon that you think that are most beneficial to your success, either individually or collaboratively? But also, what would your recommendations to others on this event, on this webinar, be to prepare you for a leadership role at any level? And what are maybe some good opportunities for a first leadership role, whether it's, again, maybe not everyone can jump into a presidency or a deanship immediately, but what's a nice first step? And I will open it to whomever would like to answer first.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. That's a lot to unpack. So I'm just going to take a piece of that and start off. And that's about the skills. I'm trained as a social worker, just like Dr. Washington. And it's interesting. This has been a job where I've really pulled on a lot of my social work training. One of the things that I learned very early is you have to have great listening skills. And not just what are people telling you, but where are the gaps in what people are telling you? And what does that say? So I do a lot of talking to people. Before COVID, I was more a walk down the hall and talk to folks because I think you pick up a lot of information. The other skill, I think, and I'm going to genderize, if that's a word. I'm going to put this in a gender category, and I don't know if that's fair. So President Whitfield, you may talk about a little bit about this. But I've heard a lot of women who say, oh, I don't know if I could be in a leadership role. I don't know if I could not take things personally. And, I'll say that being able to be an administrator, to depersonalize some of the things that come at you is definitely a skill. If I personalized everything, all I would be doing is spending my time thinking about why people don't like me. I had a provost tell me once, great advice. No dean, no administrator should ever get all glowing comments on an evaluation because that means you're not doing your job. And so I always think about if people are upset, what can I do in listening and talking to diffuse the situation and really hear them and to think this isn't Nancy Croft that they're angry with. There's something about this role that is causing them stress and concern. And those have been very helpful skill sets for me to take, across my different leadership roles.
Thank you for that. Yes, Dr. Gendron.
I'll jump in. I agree with all of that wholeheartedly. And it actually started me thinking that, one of the foundational core concepts that we teach about in gerontology is person-centered care, right? And person-centeredness. And I think that I have really leaned into that as a leader and taken person-centered care as an approach to my leadership. Because you're right, you can't personalize, but you also have to recognize that you got to meet people where they are. So allowing them the space to be themselves, taking a very strengths and appreciative based approach to where they are actually helps that depersonalization to recognize that whatever it is that they're going through is not about you. And that your job as a leader is to be there and to hear them and to support them in their success and whatever success looks like for each one of them. So for me, leadership has been kind of taking that person-centered mindset and making that about my faculty, my staff, my students, and really taking the time to meet individually with each person. I saw that Dana had a question about COVID. And one of the things that I did during COVID that I pivoted to, which took a lot of my time, but was well worth it, was had individual meetings every week with every faculty member and every staff member. But it was crucial to keeping us connected, and it was crucial to maintaining the team and the connections of the team and the morale of the team. So I think it's really meeting each person when they are and recognizing that their success is also your success as a leader. I'm so proud of their accomplishments, and that means that I am doing my job by giving them the environment that they need to be able to succeed and do their best. So I'll add that.
Well, I tell you, the more I hear Tracy talk, the more I keep thinking, I wonder where we're going to see her next. Because you have it's a mentally healthy perspective, which is that I think, as Nancy said, you can't get too into that. Somebody says that they don't like you or they don't like the decision that you made. That is what comes along with leadership, is making hard decisions. But as well, it is that, actually, I'd even take a step back, Tracy, and say, you got to make sure that you got your stuff right first. That if you have a lot going on, that may not be the time for you to go into leadership, because leadership doubly challenges you to be able to be there for others and to take others' perspectives. And more important than anything else, I feel like it's been one thing that's contributed to the minor success that I've had, is being able to listen to people. And if you have a lot of stuff going on, it's harder to listen to someone. But that's what people usually come to leaders for, is to have somebody who listens. I feel like I'm maybe like 50% of being able to actually solve problems. It's the listening piece of it where I hope that, my approval rating is a little higher than that. But I think that's important. And the other thing that I don't think anybody's brought up that I think is critically important are developmental activities. For example, I know that Patricia Henn, I think I saw Patricia Henn is on here. And she created I'm on it too, and I should know the name of it, but it's the working group sort of activities that go on at GSA. That's a developmental program. The Butler Williams program is another developmental program. For other next level leadership roles, Harvard has a bunch, Penn State has a bunch. Even, I want to say it's UNC Greensboro, but it's in Greensboro, there's a leadership group. And I'll tell you, as somebody with a background in psychology, what I find so interesting about those is that while they teach you some skills, probably to me, more importantly than anything else, they give me some space to think about leadership rather than just doing leadership. Sometimes I think we feel like we just do it automatically, but you want to be able to hone your skills and think about what you do and think about what you're doing well and what you need to improve on, how to assess it. And that's what a lot of those experiences give you the opportunity to do, which I think as well, I'd say that that helps you develop. The one last thing I would say is that everybody should have a mentor. And it's funny because sometimes mentorship lately, people just kind of throw it around too much because too, I think there's mentorship and sponsorship. But, you know, for me, I have mentors. Actually, I forgot who's on here from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I consider Freeman Hrabowski my mentor. He's been my mentor for like 10 years now. And he, you know, it's funny at the level of leadership, it's not like he tells me just what to do, although Freeman does tell me what to do. It's that he helps give me examples of how he dealt with things. And even though I could never be as great as Freeman is, but he gives me a perspective on seeing insight about how you might do stuff. And then you make it your own. I think it comes right back to what Tracy says. You kind of make this stuff your own. So it's very important. And then I promise this is the last thing. I made the differentiation between mentorship and sponsorship. That needs to be better made because mentorship are people that give you advice. It's fine. You should have, you know, multiples of them. That's fine. Sponsorship are people that step forward and advance you or speak for you. And they put some skin in the game. They use their social capital. I also find it funny that people think that social capital is a finite resource. It's not. You don't have to only help 4 people and then you don't help the other 100 in line. You can actually do it continuously. But for me, I always like to see people that I know if I spend that social capital, it's going to spin into something good. So, you know, that sponsorship piece, you need to find sponsors because the way in which you advance typically does have someone pulling for you and you need to have people pulling for you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And just to kind of recap, taking a page from Tiffany of some of the wonderful things that we've heard here, you know, these are wonderful skills. These are amazing things to fall back on and to really advance and to nurture throughout. It's the listening. It's the not taking things personally and developing that thicker skin, having a patient or participant person-centered. I guess I got stuck in the patient, but the person-centered approach to make sure that we really do target and assess what is needed from our team to enhance them and to help enable them to be the best they can be. And also to know that you need to get your own house in order before you can start caring for others. And I think that's a wonderful aspect as well. And having the time to think. And I think that's one of the other things, those developmental opportunities, having the time to think, identifying those mentors and supporters and promoters. But there was a second part of this question I would love to hear before I allow Dr. Washington to come back. And that is the second piece, where's a good place to start? You know, for individuals who are not going to be a department head, a dean, a president immediately, a provost, what are some other opportunities that can kind of see whether leadership is, you know, a low stakes opportunity? Is it good for me? Is this something I should try? Does anyone have any recommendations? I know the Butler Williams fellowship program and others, Dr. Whitfield recommended, but any others that you would recommend opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are a lot of opportunities and you can look for them in different places. I would really encourage people to look around their own institution and say, where are some places that I can get involved? Leadership not only has a skill set, but it has a mindset. And when you move into a leadership role, you're not only responsible for a particular unit, but you're responsible to be part of a leadership team that's beyond your own little domain. So, as a dean, I continue to advocate for my own college, but I'm also part of the leadership team at the university. And so seeing that perspective, and it's not always the same, and being able to move between what you have in your own backyard and the larger institution, I think is great. So like a faculty senate or university senate role would be great. The other thing, which my colleagues have already talked about, is GSA is a great resource. I got involved in my section. I'm an SRPP, and all of a sudden I became the treasurer of GSA. And that was a great experience for me. When I went back to my institution and talked about budgeting and what I learned from being part of the budget process, I did it with clarity that some people didn't expect. So use what we have in GSA or your academic organizations as well, because there's a lot that's available to you.
I'll add to that. I think GSA is also one of my top recommendations, but I think Dr. Whitfield just put it in the chat. Serving on committees and then chairing committees can be really, really beneficial. And I think for me, that was kind of the first opportunity in leadership that I really had that built some of my confidence. We used to have a Council for Community Engagement, and there was a grants division, which had a committee of about 20 people that decided on grant award winners. And I chaired that committee for a couple of years, and going through the whole process of recruiting people to training people to the process of selecting the grant finalists and interviewing and all of that was the first test of my leadership. And I think that was enormously helpful for me. But as you said, it was kind of low consequence because it was a one and done committee. So, and then did it again the next year and built my confidence even more. So I think taking advantage of those that are within the university, those opportunities you have to chair committees or co-chair committees is enormously helpful.
So much intelligence has just been shared with you. I'm trying to think of what to add to that. I think maybe the thing that I would add is that do try to do things that you're passionate about. Because then the time and the energy that you expend actually it gets worthwhile. I think too that there are some people who are very, very strategic about the things they do in the committees that they're on and all that kind of stuff. For myself, I'm just a service-oriented person. I think, as people were saying, GSA is this great place. And if you start doing service in GSA, it may be, you're a service-oriented person. And so then you can follow that, or it could be different balances. I mean, I think Tracy mentioned, maybe she was the last one to say not it, but it was her time. But then she still was a service-oriented person and thinking about the benefits and what she could bring to the role. And again, you never know where it's going to lead you. I think that's the reason why you do it, for the service piece, not for the climbing piece. Although I think it's fine if you have some greater aspirations, that's fine. But if at the heart of it, you don't care about the service, all the things like what Nancy was talking about relative to your decisions as a leader being circumspect by lots of people, it gets to be a little bit tougher. I think when you make decisions and you do these things because it's something that you're passionate about, it's something that you care about, and you're a service-oriented leader, then whether people like it or not, it was probably, hopefully they were decisions that were made for the best of everyone because you came from the right perspective in making those decisions.
Outstanding. Thank you for allowing me to circle back and getting those additional insights. I will turn it over to Dr. Washington.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, please drop your questions in the chat, and we'll move to those questions after I pose this next question. As you move beyond the department level, Dr. Croft and Dr. Whitfield have, as you've already done, as you move beyond the department level, how do you facilitate success across disciplines, right? And earlier, Dr. Croft, you mentioned how you draw upon your social work training. Has your training as a gerontologist played a role in how you facilitate success across the disciplines? And anyone can start.
Well, I'm happy to go first. It absolutely has. We in gerontology are used to multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary relationships. We know that the sum is more than just the parts. And I've really drawn upon that in my various roles. As I said before this job, and again, this is the general ed core part of the university. So there really is no social work. There's a lot of English, a lot of math, a lot of chemistry. And that was something that I just had to embrace as my own. And before this, I was in nursing and health professions. Social work wasn't part of that college as well. And there's a few strategies that I used. One is to be able to understand the research or the teaching in different areas. I had to make it my homework to do some background reading, talking. I went to some conferences in health professions. I've been to more nursing conferences now than I ever thought that I would. But it really helped me understand the science, the priority, the language, the mindset. And I think when you are a gerontologist, you know, we're used to that. We're used to going to the GSA sessions where the panelists don't come from our own academic area. It doesn't feel like it's a pair of shoes that doesn't fit. So I actually think that all of us who are in gerontology have the right kind of perspective to be able to work across different areas than our own academic home.
Yeah.
I'll go second. You know, it's an interesting question. I struggle with it a little bit because in my training, I'm an interdisciplinary person. So going to GSA, you know, that's you know, like going to the promised land. You know you're going to get these people that in sessions are going to come from different perspectives. And rather than being something that might be awkward or takes work, that's how I think anyway. And so it works very well for me. I think then in leadership roles, what's fascinating is that you have been in situations where you don't know the subject matter. So hopefully you can be comfortable and say, you know, actually people have been harassing me around here saying, I'm always asking why. You know, oh, you know, this machine takes air and pumps it out into space. Why? How? Or I ask how, you know, so how does it do that? And having that curiosity and openness because you've done interdisciplinary work, I think, and because when you work with somebody who's an expert in something else, you want to hear what they do and say. And it's even to the point that you don't have to understand it. I went over to an engineering lab and I honestly think I understood 1% of what was being told to me, but I knew it was cool. And so again, I think that's one of the interesting things about gerontology as a field is that we tend to be interdisciplinary anyway. So it's not as hard for us to make those switches and thoughts about how other disciplines, what their standards are, what their criteria for success is, because it tends to be sometimes different from one that you may be in, what your basic background is in. So I just think it's natural.
Yeah. Dr. Gendron, any comments?
No, I don't have anything to add, especially given I'm at the department level. So I think that summed it up nicely.
It was a good summary. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll turn it back over to the committee for questions in the chat.
Anya, did you want to bring the first one forward?
Sure, I can do that. We had a number of different questions that came through on the chat. I was wondering if we might go back to one of the earlier ones, and I think all of you have touched on this in little bits and pieces in some of your answers already. But we had a question about how do you know when it's the right time to take on a leadership position? If we could maybe just give a second to that one.
I'd say that's, you know, it's so funny. That's such an individual situation. And actually one of the other questions there or comments that was in the chat was about work-life balance. And I think it's almost a piece of intersection for that. You know, there'll be times in your career where you can clearly see, yeah, I have plenty of bandwidth to be able to take on a leadership position. And then there's other times when there's far less. And I think that that makes it a tough part. Also, what the leadership position actually is can be a piece of whether you figure out whether the fit is right for you. You know, no leadership position ultimately is perfect. And, you know, you only get to do the things you just love to do, but it should have a central component of what you like to do. When I think of, you know, the things that Nancy has done, and I'm figuring out, you know, the scale and scope of what you're doing has gone from being really good at this much to being, it's the same things, but it's this much to do. So even the scale and scope of what you have to do is important. And I would also go back to the issue about mentors and see, you know, if your mentor has some insights about what they think that that role would involve and what the pluses and minuses are. And hopefully they can tell you a little bit about yourself. I find it fascinating because my mentor has always, my graduate mentor has always shrugged off the things that I wanted to do relative to leadership. He just thought, he's like, oh, who wants to do that? You know, and so, you know, it's good to have multiple mentors because they may come at some of these things from a different perspective. But I don't think that there's a clear, easy way to figure out whether something is a good opportunity for you or not. You ultimately have to be the decider of that, because it's not just about the work that you're doing. It's also about, you know, work-life balance, to be able to figure out whether this is something that fits in. But I still go back to the point, and I'm a big advocate of this. Get through as much of the academy as you can. Get to full professor, because leadership typically does not provide you the work that will lead to a promotion to associate or to full. It gets to be very, very difficult. Now, it's not that you shouldn't do anything. Like, I think assistant professors should be involved in committees and things, but those big heavy loads, usually where there's a title behind your name, those should hopefully be ones that you can take on once you've actually made it through the academy to a full professor. That's my 2 cents.
When I started feeling more excited than scared, I think that was an indication for me that it might be a good time for me to explore it a little bit more deeply. And one of the things that I did that was helpful to me was I asked a whole lot of chairs, a whole lot of questions. So I think you need to do your due diligence and ask people, what is this really like? You know, not in the interview process when you're trying to impress everybody, but for real, what is this like? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the things that you wish you knew before you took this position? And then you have all of the information in front of you to really make a good decision on whether you think it's the right time for you in your life. I will say, if you are, you know, raising a family, if you have young children, that's something to think about as well, because it certainly does take time away, or a rebalancing of time. So it is about making sure you are in the right place and that you have all the supports that you need to make sure that you can succeed in it. Ask a lot of questions to a lot of people.
And I'll just add one thing. I think it's human behavior to think about what we don't know or where we haven't succeeded. I mean, that's where our mind goes. And so I keep a list of those times that I've been successful in my leadership role. I do kind of an inventory. And if I want to pursue an opportunity, I've already known what areas I haven't been successful. I go and look and say, what have I been able to accomplish? And sort of hold that up and make a good decision. And I'll say, most of the jobs that I've been in, I only learned when I got in there and really started peeling away what it involved. And so as an antecedent, I don't think I could have understood what it took for me to be successful. I know every time I've held a job, I've done fairly well. So that kind of track record I bring with me, with the faith that I'll do the on-the-job learning that I need to, with the good skills that Tracy talked about and the good support. But sometimes it's really hard to know until you get in there and start seeing what's part of your new position.
Well, and let me just jump onto that point, because Nancy's list of the things that she doesn't do well, it's a blank sheet of paper. So don't be fooled. That's just a whatever. But I really like what you said, Nancy. And it just, you know, it's become a little bit of a cliche word, but it is very important. And that is that usually the skills that get you into a job are not the skills that you need to be able to be successful at the job. You need others. And so you should be, hopefully, you know, we're trying to assess how do you figure out where you're at, that you should have a growth mindset. You should be open to that. You're going to learn in that position that you're going to get, that you're not going to go in. If you go in just knowing everything, you're probably not going to be as good, because nothing is so static that it shouldn't be challenging you to do some other things, to, you know, whether it's to modernize things or to innovate or whatever. So having that growth mindset, I think, is one of those important steps, one of those important characteristics that one should have as they're trying to think about a leadership position.
Well, thank you all for those. This really gives us some things to think about. And one last thing from the chat as we get near the time of ending our session today that I don't think we've touched on yet is about how moving into a leadership role within your own institution affects your relationships with your colleagues. I know I went to a training program on how to become a dean. We called it Dean School in my profession of pharmacy. And I was told that being a dean was a very lonely job by several deans. So I am just curious your response to that, as it might play in the decision for some people to take on these roles.
Absolutely. So as I said before, I was an internal faculty member who became chair, and these were my friends, and they still are my friends. But we had some very good and transparent conversations right when that transition was taking place, because I knew it was going to change and I knew it had to change. So to be very thoughtful and transparent about it actually set the stage for it to be successful, you know, knowing we are no longer peer-to-peer, but we still very much care about each other and we're still friends, but the dynamic is changing because now I'm supervising you and responsible for giving you a rating and all of that. So I think for us, having that advanced conversation was really helpful. Recognizing that this is going to look different than it has for the past few years was really helpful, so that we had the expectations laid out. And then we were, you know, able to kind of craft together what our new relationship was going to look like. And it became one that was a little bit more supportive, one that was a little bit more about mentoring. I loved that thing about sponsoring. I have to really think about that more, because that's a really important distinction. So I would recommend, if it's something you do, that you just need to be really thoughtful and transparent about it and have open communication with people.
Yeah, I think it's a very important decision. When I was at my previous institution, I had started there as an assistant professor from VCU, where I got my PhD, and decided there was an opportunity to, you know, be in the deanship, and I just decided that was not right for me. I'd grown up in that school. It was something where I had various relationships with individuals. And I made the decision that for me, the best opportunity would be to leave and go someplace else. And sometimes we have to put that in the mix of our decision making. Either there's not opportunities at our own institution, or the context is not right for us to move up in our career for some of the reasons that we're discussing now. So I think, you know, part of the formula is how movable are you? How mobile are you? And what's at your own institution, and is that right because of the social dynamics that we're discussing?
Yeah, those are all good points from my colleagues. And I have now been told that the president's job is the loneliest job. And it is because of the dynamics, I think, particularly what Tracy was saying about because you're in a role where you are making decisions, and it's one of those things where, too, you know, if you've got dean behind your name, people know what a dean is. You know, people know what a chair is, and that there are certain expectations, thoughts, and assumptions that go along with it. And there can be dynamics that start if there are people that are, you know, you're trying to make as new friends, or people that you're supervising that you weren't friends with before, and they're trying to be your friends, that they may be doing it for the wrong purposes. So there's all of that, I think, that's in the mix. But I think one of the points that Tracy made that I think is very, very true. The people who are your friends will still be your friends. You know, hopefully they have enough of a growth mindset that they can adjust, because, you know, chairs, you know, typically, you know, for all most administrative roles, it's a fixed time span. And so for me, and actually this ties back to something we were talking earlier about keeping your research going, I very well may, you know, go back to being a faculty member at some point in time. And to me, not being too far away from that is useful for me. But, you know, it is during that time period, your responsibilities, you know, I'm watching the time. I don't want to talk too much, but I will just share with you, I'm coming up on my 11th month as a president. And all of us know what a president is, but few of us know what it's like to be a president until you're a president. And for me, I'm just one of the people that's at the university that works. And people sometimes make such a fuss because you've shown up. You know, oh my gosh, this is the dean of the college and everybody's on their best behavior because you've got that title. And I think people do that with the president sometimes. And I'm like, you know, hey, show me what you do. Help me to understand what's going on. What can I do to help you? And it's funny because sometimes it clashes because of what their expectations of what the president is supposed to be. You know, I think I'm supposed to be a little taller. I think I'm supposed to be a little thinner. But, you know, there are assumptions that go along with those positions as soon as you have them, regardless of what your responsibilities are. But when you're in a supervisory leadership role, that title in different people's minds takes different ideas. And so it is interesting trying to manage the social piece of being a leader. And I think that's a great question.
Thank you so much. And we are getting to the end of our time today. And so to close out our session, we've asked each of the panelists to share a pearl of wisdom about leadership roles in academia with us. And we're going to start with Dr. Gendron. Would you like to share your pearl?
Oh my gosh, I have to look it up. So I emailed it to you yesterday. It was something about community engagement and how I
Shall
learned.
I read it?
Yes. Could you read it? That'd be great.
Yes. Integrate the buckets of teaching, research, and service under the umbrella of community engagement as a way to dovetail all these efforts. And that way you can be successful. It's, yes. So that idea that you put all your, when you can find opportunities for synergy between the different pieces of your role, then you have opportunity to be more successful. That's good advice.
Thank you. Quickly, to put it in the context of what Dr. Whitfield said, it's if you're a service person, then you use that and you go with your heart, and then you kind of bring it all together, your teaching, research, and service underneath that bucket.
Nice, thank you. Dr. Croft.
Sure. Yeah, I think President Winfield had a great piece of advice, which is to invest in ourselves and take advantage of leadership opportunities. And I was thinking about the younger me who went to HERS, Higher Education for Women. It was at Bryn Mawr. It was a great experience. And I had to set professional goals. And the younger me would have never seen me in this me's position. And so my pearl of wisdom is that it's great to set professional goals, but be willing to change them as opportunities come your way. Don't be so driven to accomplish your goals that you give up even better ones that you might not have dreamt about earlier.
Thank you. That's wonderful advice for us to take from this session today. And Dr. Whitfield, your pearl?
Pearls, let's see. Make sure that you know how to raise your hand, say not it. So that you don't get chosen for things that maybe aren't for you. I love Nancy's piece. I'm such a big supporter and just fan of the HERS program. That is one of those really, it makes a significant difference in the leadership that you see in people. It's a very well-designed program, and I encourage that for everyone. But you know, a pearl might be, and it's so funny because I read something recently that contradicted this, is that I have really led a very, very blessed life and career. And I pursued the things that I wanted to do because I wanted to do them, because I was passionate about them or I was really curious about them. And I'll be honest with you, when I was an assistant professor, when I was an associate professor, when I was a full professor, I never thought that I would be a university president. It's still a little surreal. Here in Nevada, it gets very, very hot. And sometimes when I'm outside and it gets really, really hot, I get a little dizzy and I go, oh my gosh, you became a president. And the reality hits me. But I love the job that I have. It is an absolutely fantastic job because I get to make a difference, because I get to be a servant leader, because I get to be a research scholar. I just have a great time. And I hope for everyone that you're able to figure out what's the right thing for you, because the right thing for you is not the right thing for me or for Nancy or for Tracy. You've got to figure out the right thing for you. And I think the ideas of just the right timing, there's a whole story behind how I became president here. And I would have never been able to sit and figure out what the perfect set of timing and events were going to happen that mirrored this. And it's the same thing for being provost at Wayne State. It was not anything that anyone could have said that's the perfect situation. So they're imperfect situations. You do them, and I think, like Nancy said, you kind of revise and resubmit of that. If it's not ends up being the right one, do it for the right reasons. Maybe when the time's time to go, then you transition to something else. But I think being a part of a community, being and contributing like that, if that's what your focus is, it'll usually lead to really good consequences and outcomes.
Excellent. Another wonderful pearl to share with our participants today. And please, everyone, join me in thanking our panelists for generously sharing their time, their leadership experiences, their perspectives with us today. We also want to thank our moderators and our work group members who planned this conversation. And thank you to all the participants for your questions, your insightful comments, and a big thank you to Gina Schoen from GSA staff, who was behind the scenes all the way along in the planning and execution of today's career conversation. Thank you all for making it possible. And we will be sending out a brief survey following this event for you to provide feedback and help us in planning future career conversations. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. I think we could keep talking about this all afternoon. It's a wonderful topic, and thank you all, panelists especially.
Thank you, Dr. Slatum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.